you to this beautiful day, beautiful time. And today we're going to talk about a few things. And we're going to talk about conflict resolution. That's the talk I have chosen for today. Conflict resolution. In the first place, I would like to clear a bit of air. There is another concept of conflict management. These are two different things. Actually, for me, these are two different things. What makes them different is, when you talk of conflict management, it almost amounts to having something, but managing it. So, what you mean to say when you say conflict management, you keep it there, but you manage it. But I'm of the opinion that we should go for conflict resolution, removing it actually. Because if you keep it there, the undercurrent will always play against you. Somehow you have to try to remove it, and that's what I understand, that we have to go for conflict resolution rather than conflict management. Before we go into it, I would like to talk a little about what exactly is conflict. When you talk of conflicts, we understand that our existence in itself is no less than a conflict. Our coming to the world is no less than a conflict. Yes. Especially in modern day world. Whether someone should come to the world or not, that gives rise to conflict. Whether someone should have a child or not, there is a conflict. And the conflict becomes uglier if it is a matter of, unplanned affairs, a missed contraceptive or something like that. It becomes uglier. Right? Now the question is, I say, what's a conflict? Conflict means when there is a difference of approach. There could be difference of belief. There could be difference of attitude. You approach a problem in a different way, and your companion, your partner, looks at it in a different way. Because we do not carry the same eyes, the same mind that are so similar. That's not possible. Even if we may be very closely connected in our personal life, in our professional life, yet the dissimilarities cannot be wished away. That are there, that will be there. And we must learn to live and, move forward along with all these differences. That's why I said conflict is difference of opinion. You have different opinion of things. It's not necessary that everybody should think like you. Why should someone? And collision of thoughts. You are you, exclusively you. You cannot be someone else. And someone else never ever expects someone else to be you. You have your own thought process. You have your own approach towards things. Something that may make you weep. There is every possibility someone else may laugh at the same. You look at something as a tragedy, but someone else may look at it as a comedy. For example, if I say, there's a man who drinks a glass of juice, thinking that it will give him a good health, but the next moment suffers a heart attack. And yet there is someone who consumes poison to put an end to the life, but he survives, and survives more healthy. You can look at it in different ways. You can call it a tragedy that the man, drank a glass of juice and suffered a heart attack. Now, what is it for you? It could be comedy for you, or it could be tragedy for you. It depends on your outlook. So the question is that collision of thoughts could be there, and then there could be clash of interests. That would give rise to a conflict. My interests, your interests, his interests, her interests, and there are a host of people whose interests are there, involved everywhere, whatever we do. So that clash of interests, that can give rise to the conflict. And then there is difference of attitude and approach, etc. All these things have to be taken care of while we think of conflict resolutions. Now, these conflicts are of two types. In the first place, I believe, internal conflicts and the external conflicts. In my own understanding of things, I place internal conflict at the base of all the conflicts. Now the question is, what is internal conflict? Internal conflict is when you are groping within, when you are struggling within, when your own capacities and capabilities go in multiple directions, when your heart wants to do something but your mind stops you, when you want to marry a particular person, you love him, her so passionately that you cannot imagine life without him or her, but simultaneously you have been put on a warning by your people around. Don't do it. You win him, you lose us. You win her, you lose us. And then begins that struggle inside you. What do I do? Do I lose him or her, or do I lose them? It's a dilemma. That struggle, this kind of conflict, to be or not to be, age-old saying. That's the question. We come across these dilemmas, and these dilemmas give rise to an internal conflict. And as I said, that I believe that this is the fundamental of base of all the conflicts that we come across in our life. Internal conflict is it's more devastating than the external conflict. And then the external conflicts. External conflicts could be any. It could be interpersonal, it could be social, it could be domestic, and it could be professional. The question is, what are the areas of conflict? My question is, what are not the areas of conflict? Where is it that we do not face conflicts? Conflicts, as I said, are born before we are born. Conflicts are born before our birth. Before we come to this world, our share of conflicts has already reached here. Now, these external conflicts could be multiple, varied. As I said, social, these could be interpersonal and other. Now, there are some causes that we have to understand. That what exactly are the causes of conflicts? Now, the first one that I talk about is, I would change the sequence of the words here. The first thing that I would place as one of the major causes of conflict is prejudice. Being prejudicial. This is an innate negative tendency that human beings share. Prejudice means when we form an opinion, which we usually do, most often we do, unconsciously, not deliberately, but we do. When we form opinion about people, situations, and things that are around us without knowing the facts, without making an attempt to research to know the reality of it. That's where we become prejudicial. I do not like this person. I don't know why. Maybe he has some big hair or a long nose. That's why I do not like him. Although I don't have to work with his ears or his nose. My dealings with him are, he's a trainer, I'm a learner, or he's a learner, I'm a trainer. But this prejudicial mindset, sometimes we form opinions about people without knowing much about them. Sometimes we take decisions about situations without knowing much about these situations. So prejudice is one, and then it leads to bias. When we are prejudicial, it leads to our biased approach. We decide about some people, without knowing the reality of the things, without knowing the facts. And then there are other factors like fear and insecurity. I react in a certain situation preemptively, based on my bias and based on my prejudice. I react preemptively. I fear. I develop that feeling of insecurity that the person A, B, or C is going to harm my interests. It's a preemptive approach. And I start reacting accordingly. I start reacting, believing that this person is going to harm my interests somehow. So that's another reason for it. And then there is that element of mistrust and distrust. We end up at times without, again I say, Maybe sometimes a smaller incident happens wherein we believe that someone has betrayed our trust. Although he may not have done it deliberately, but we take it for granted that he is not the person to be trusted. We always take him like that. We do not think that maybe it may have happened mistakenly. He may not have done it deliberately, so that mistrust and distrust again gives rise to this conflict. Then there is another very important reason that's paramount, and that's the communication and coordination failure or gap. When we are not able to communicate properly, when we do not listen to the people carefully, when we do not say exactly what we mean, many a time we end up saying what we do not mean, and many a time we never mean to say what we say. This communication gap or this communication failure is one of the major causes that gives rise to conflict in professional places, in workplaces. When we are not able to explain ourselves, I'll put it like this way. It's not like when people do not understand us. Let's put it this way. When we are not able to explain ourselves, when we are not clear in our own, perhaps we must put it like this, that I failed to explain. I failed to put my point across. Not that people failed to understand. I would take it this way. So this communication gap has to be bridged. It has to be there. It's one of the causes. And then there are other cultural differences, ethnic differences. There are so many. And then I have added one more here. Modulus malignity. At times this is again strange. This is very strange. Based on that, what I said, prejudice. Sometimes we oppose people in the name of nothing. Although we don't have a motive added to it, but we end up opposing people unnecessarily. That's what we call as motiveless malignity. I don't have a motive, but still I oppose. Why do I oppose? I don't know. Do I benefit from it? I don't know. Not at all. But still I oppose. That could be one more cause. These are some psychological reasons. And then, before we go into the solutions, before we talk about what could be the possible solutions for resolving the conflicts, I would like you to go for a small activity. And the activity is very simple. I would like you to go through your life, turn the pages of your life, and see, do you think that you have been through conflicts?
Yes.
All of us have been,
Yes.
and smaller and bigger. I wish that you could bring to your mind the ugliest conflict that you were caught up in. And that, just imagine that situation when you thought that everyone around you was right.
Yes.
But you believed that you are right. But in the end it was proved that everyone was right and you were wrong. Or it could be the other way around. When you believed that you are right, but everybody made fun of you saying that no, you're wrong. But in the end it was proved that you were right. Just imagine a situation like this. Just turn back the pages of your life and just write down a few points. Just talk in your group and just narrate to your group what was that situation when you were right and everybody was wrong. But ultimately it was proved that. Yes, please.
तो ये इशू जो है इंटरनल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का है. अराउंड फ्यू डिकेड अगो जब मैंने सोचा कि आई विल स्टार्ट अ बिजनेस इन प्लेस ऑफ सरकारी नौकरी करने के, सो इट वाज अ ह्यूज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट. और हमारी जो कम्युनिटी है, पर्टिकुलर पहाड़ी लोग, दे बिलीव इन द गवर्नमेंट जॉब. देयर मोर फोकस इज गवर्नमेंट जॉब. इवन क्या होता है कि लोग लड़की भी नहीं देते हैं अगर आप सरकारी नौकरी में नहीं हो. ठीक है, या इट्स ट्रूथ. इन आवर कम्युनिटी आपको बहुत सारी वो जन्म पत्री देते हैं कि भाई ओके लड़के से मैच करोगे तो यू कैन लुक फॉरवर्ड टू मैरिज. लेकिन जब पता लगा वो नौकरी नहीं कर रहा है, बिजनेस कर रहा है, तो दे टेक इट अवे. ओके, तो कंफ्लिक्ट वाज दैट कि एवरीबॉडी वाज ट्राइंग टू डिस्करेज मी कि बिजनेस मत करो. एंड इवन आई फाइंड आउट द प्रॉब्लम्स कि जब मैं कुछ लोगों को जाता था बिजनेस की बात करने के लिए कि ऐसा, बिकॉज दैट टाइम वी हैव few thousand rupees in our pockets and I was discussing about 100 crores, 200 crores, 500 crore kind of business plan and thinking. वो कंफ्लिक्ट जो है लोग जो बार बार मुझे डिमोरलाइज कर रहे थे. एंड आई वाज conflict with lot of internal conflict with myself कि मैं सही भी सोच रहा हूँ कि नहीं सोच रहा हूँ. सच में कोई मतलब इतने because I am only one talking to myself. I thinking कि यार 100 crore, 200 crore, 1000 crore की कंपनी बनाई जा सकती है. And everybody is saying no. Even not a single person in your community, friend circle, उसे यार नहीं अच्छा है, सोच लो, thinking कर लो, बन सकती है. So this was the conflict. I had a conflict with myself.
Yeah.
But I was sure myself कि give it a chance to myself. If I have not done it, no problem. But at least I will satisfy myself कि मैं कर नहीं पाया, कोई बात नहीं है. लेकिन I have given the full chance.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful, really. Internal conflict का example है. So let's, if anybody else wants to speak, but we can just see that later, right? We will listen to others later because for paucity of the time. Now, since there are so many conflicts, so many types of conflict, internal, external, and then external conflicts are of different types. For today, I have chosen this conflict particularly to talk about this conflict and the resolution of it. And for the resolution of professional conflicts, I have devised a program that's exclusively my own, my original program, and I have named the program as Leaders for Conflict Resolution. Because whenever there is a conflict, who is there to resolve?
Leaders.
The leader or the leaders. That's why I have named my conflict resolution program as Leaders. How do we go about it? What are the approaches? What are the things that we are supposed to do while we are in conflict resolution? The first thing that I have listed there is, I will just read them aloud and then I'll explain. Listen, evaluate the opinions, analyze, discourage extremes and devise a solution, empathize with persons, reassure trust, subside the situation and solve the problem. Now let's take these things one by one. How does a leader resolve the conflicts? The first one I say is listen and learn. While talking about the causes of conflict, I emphasized on one basic thing. That was the communication. When is some of this communication, where exactly does the problem begin? The greater part of it, there are two sides to communication. There are so many things, but two sides, speaking and listening. When it comes to verbal communication, that usually happens in the offices, in the workplaces. When you come to that, which part suffers the most?
Listening.
The listening part. I give you an example because of my academic background of the schools. I have 20 years I have been working in schools, colleges and universities. For 5 years, last 6 years I have been working at the university. The biggest problem in the learning process is, bad listening. We emphasize everywhere, you should read more, you should write more, you should speak, there is so much emphasis on speaking. You should speak a lot, you should try to speak. But I have not heard many people talking about listening. In college and schools, we have these listening exercises in the textbooks and the teacher skips it. It's not important, just move on.
Yeah.
That's very strange. Because listening is so important and we end up as, bad listeners. And should I tell you that I have observed it, that it's bad listeners who end up as bad learners.
Yes.
This trait continues when we get into our professional lives. We do not listen to things clearly. Listening, there are two words. I would like to just make a quick difference between the two. There are two words. One is listening and other is hearing.
Yeah.
Right? For example, I'm talking to you right now and you're all ears. You're listening to me deliberately, intently you are listening. Very carefully. But simultaneously there is a car honking on the road. That noise, that voice reaches your ears. You listen to that as well. You hear that. You only hear that. That you do not differentiate whether the honking is coming from a car or it's coming from a bus or whatever. You hear that. But when I'm talking, you're listening to every word very carefully. That's the difference between listening and hearing. And the worst part of our modern day life is so full of cacophony of thoughts, full of meaningless sounds, that we usually lose up, listening to the proper things. We end up hearing rather than listening. So this listening is one of the problems that gives rise to conflicts. If we listen carefully, you listen and you learn. Learn what? Learn what is the conflict. Listen to who? The people involved in the conflict, the parties involved in the conflict. You have to listen to everybody. Listen means you have to understand. You have to apprehend every pro and con of it. And then you have to learn what exactly is this. So that makes for L of the program leaders, conflict resolution. And the next thing we go into is...
So I have a question.
Sir, I'll take all the questions at the end of the talk.
Oh.
Right? I'm sorry, but that's my... Now the next thing is, after listening to all the parties involved in the conflict, after learning about the conflict itself, you have to evaluate. You have to evaluate. You have to evaluate every argument put in that people may come up with. Expected that they will come up with conflicting thoughts. That's why there is conflict. You have to evaluate every thought. You have to evaluate every opinion. You have to appreciate every opinion. No matter, it may not be that just. It may not please you. It may not please you. It may not make you happy. It may seem dross to you. Absolutely baseless, meaningless, trash. But you don't have to tell them that it's trash, it's dross, it's meaningless. You have to appreciate that first, and then you have to evaluate on your own. Once you evaluate, you have to give due respect to all the conflicting parties involved by appreciating, by listening to them and evaluating. And one thing you must do all the way is never ever tell them that it's such a complex problem. It would be really wonderful in the first place if you tell them, yes, it is a problem there, but it's not, something that cannot be resolved. You have to assure them that it is a problem, it may be complex, but it can be solved. You can tell them, don't worry about it, it isn't that complex. We can resolve it. There are differences and differences can be resolved. That comes, but when you evaluate. And then the next part is, after you make the evaluation, after you listen to every party caught up in the conflict, you analyze the whole issue. Haste makes waste. Hurry spoils the curry. Don't hurry. Don't run through. Just be patient. Analyze the things very carefully. Take your time. Don't jump the guns. Analyze the whole issue and then you come up with a solution. Because solutions will come only after you analyze each and everything that is involved in that conflict. When you make a good analysis, you are able to make some good opinions. You are able to, look at everything that could harm or benefit your presence there. So analysis is very important. You have to analyze the whole conflict. And then comes the next thing. I again put it a little bit of reverse. You have to discourage the extremes, because whenever you are caught up in a conflict, you will find extremes. You will find people, placed as north and south. North Pole and the South Pole. These are extremes. You have to discourage these extremes. You have to somehow try to bring them to some middle ground, to some common ground, some meeting point. First of all, you have to point out the common points that are there, similarities. You work on the similarities. If there are 10 points, you will definitely find out there are 7 points where they meet, or 8 points where they meet. First of all, bring them there, and then towards the end of it, after having evaluated, after having analyzed, you pull down to these 2 points and try to avoid the extremes. But ultimately, what you are supposed to do is, after having evaluated the whole issue, after having evaluated every opinion, you devise a solution by discouraging the extremes and encouraging the common ground, the middle ground, the meeting points, right? And then we move to the next part of it. How do you do that? How do you find that common ground? There's a very important thing that you have to do. For that is, You have to, as I said, you have to empathize with people. You have to identify with the people even who may seem to you be vilest, who may seem to be weird. How is it possible? How can you say that? But you have to understand that people can say anything. And people have right to say anything. They will say anything, they will end up in saying things that you may not have imagined. What then? You have to be patient. You have to, as I said, empathize with them. You have to identify with them. Later on, once you identify, once you empathize, you are almost on one side, and then you can whisper it into his ear. Come on, gentlemen, it's all right. You are saying wonderful. I do not disagree. But if you put it this way, you empathize with them, you identify yourself with them, and you have to generate that atmosphere that the conflict is not, it's not about you and me versus you. No, it's you, me versus the conflict. We together are facing the conflict. Let us sit together. Let's talk it out. Let's discuss it. Let's find out the alternatives, the substitutes, the other ways of moving ahead, rather than sticking to our own narrow spaces. So it has to be not me versus you, as I said, but it has to be you, me, and the problem, or versus the problem. And then the last thing that you're going to do is you have to reset. You have to reset the whole system, because these conflicts. I have been an ardent follower of that inner core of the things. It has to start from there. Yeah. You have to remove that distrust that crops up during your journey of working together, of working on the same goal. Actually, you're working in a company. Both of you are working for what? For the growth of the company, and that you also grow with it. You get the same assignment, but your approach could be different. Person A would like to go from left, and the other person would like to go from the right. But then you have to find that common path but the goal is same. You want to reach that point, say for example Z. You want to reach that. You may like to move from right, and someone else may like to move from left. But that moving from left and moving from right could be disastrous, because you will be pulling the same thing in opposite directions. So you have to find a common path wherein you could move together, move ahead together, and that's why I said that trust has to be built up. That trust suffers, because as I said, that element of fear, that insecurity, that shakes the foundation of human relation. All the human relations are based on that foundation called trust. That is shaken. You have to reset that. You have to reset the whole relation. You have to reassure. You have to tell the people that it's like, come on, let's move together. I still care for you. We are sailing in the same boat. And if we row it in opposite directions, there is every possibility that we will sink. Better is that we find a better way of just moving in the proper way. So you have to reset that whole relation, and you have to especially reassure the trust, that you trust them and you expect them to trust you as well. And then once that trust is established, once that trust is reset, once you reset your relation, that is the time when you can think and you can take your decision and you can come up with a solution. And this is the time. This is the time when you have to be decisive. Throughout the process, as an arbitrator or as an, I suppose all of you must be knowing the word ombudsman, the arbitrator kind of thing.
Yeah,
during this whole process, you don't have the here's a picture. I would like you to look at it for 15 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because after 15 seconds, I'm going to turn it off. Please. A very beautiful picture, really.
Yeah.
Interesting,
Yeah.
intriguing.
Yeah.
All I want you to do is just write down what did you see.
Three different things.
Just write it down, please.
Yes.
Three different things.
Wonderful. All right. Let's listen to some of you. Let's start with you. What did you see?
So I saw a woman's face, of course. Then I saw a number of people there, and then I saw a donkey or there was a donkey or a horse. I don't know.
Of mule.
A mule. Okay. Yeah. Those three things.
All right.
I said 14 women.
14 women.
14.
Okay.
All right.
Women.
I saw the cake. केक के अंदर से फेस दिखा था लेडीज का और फेस के अंदर फेस दिखा.
Yes. Yes.
The people who are coming to, attack you, and there are people who are defending you, and you are focusing on that one.
All right. Yes. Good.
I saw Jesus Christ.
You saw Jesus. You saw Jesus.
And a woman.
Yes.
And I don't know whether it was a kutta or donkey. I don't know, but it was a woman.
Yeah. Anybody else who saw something different?
Yeah, I saw Jesus
You saw Jesus.
and a few followers of Jesus.
Yes.
And also few who were anti-Jesus.
Anti-Jesus. Yes.
Jesus.
More than 30,
People
40
saw
people
20
covering
people.
their
I
head.
saw 30.
With their head covered. Yeah.
Yes. And what did you see in the eyes of the Jesus? Did you see something in the eyes of the Jesus?
Empathy. The decision.
You saw empathy, sympathy. All right. But I saw two people in his eyes.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Now, the point that I want to bring home, because it's already concluded, the point I want to bring home is that you looked at the same picture and that everybody has his own opinion about the picture.
Right. Put the picture back, sir.
Right? The thing is that how do you, as I said that we are not carrying the same brain everywhere. Everybody has his own eyes, has his own mind, has his own understanding, has his own perception of things. You will look at things differently. And we have every right to look at things differently. If you see here, you see some men here and you see some here and in the eyes as well, right? Anyway, my simple point is that this is what life is all about. Right? I just conclude with a small example. Once a father and a child, they were going through some valleys and the child suddenly started crying, "Oh, come on, I want that flower." And the father said, "I don't see any flower. There is no flower up in this mountain. It's the stony mountain. It's all rocky here. There are no flowers." But the child kept crying, "No, I want that flower." But the father said, "There is no flower. Come on. It's a rocky mountain. Where do I get the flower?" What do children do towards that if you don't give them something? They will simply lie down. They will lie down flat, right? And when the child lied down on the ground, the father moved down to pick up the child. When he moved down to pick up the child, he saw a flower.
Yeah.
Because when he was at that level.
Yeah.
Because when he came down to the level of the child, that's where he saw the flower. Because as long as you stand that moral high pedestal, you cannot look at the problems. You have to come down to the level of the people. That's what will help you to resolve the issues when you see things through their eyes. Thank you very much. Thank you all.